with Mark and Alicia here from Healthy Immigration Law. Those of you who are tuning in on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, or here on YouTube, which is kind of our flagship location, welcome. How are you doing, Alicia? Are you staying warm?
Staying warm. It is cold out here in Alberta, as you know, Mark, because we've all been shoveling and dealing with wind chill and everything else. But I guess we can't complain too much because October was unbelievably fall, beautiful weather, and I guess it's all payback now. So now we've got our blizzards.
Indeed. And yes, there has been snow. And yes, Mark has been shoveling his walk. Sometimes down here in Lethbridge, closer to the US border, this lovely Chinook wind blows in, and sometimes it will melt the snow before I have to shovel it. But that's not the case now. So yes, there was a whole lot of shoveling going on, and that's just comes part and parcel. But here's the thing, for those of you who are wondering, why in the world would I want to come live in a tundra? Well, it's not a tundra. But here's the best part, at least from my perspective, we don't have nearly the bugs that you guys do in those warmer locations. Cockroaches, what are those? We don't have those. We might have the odd friendly ant or maybe a spider that comes to visit us, but we don't have the infestations of the bugs that you guys have in the warmer climates. So, and remember, I have a nice, beautifully warm heater in my house. And if I do want to go out and have fun skiing or snowmobiling or all those activities, building snow forts, I can always come back in and warm up. So that's my pitch for dealing with the winters in Canada. And yeah, so I know, Alicia, you guys do quite a bunch of fun things even in the winter as well with your family.
Yeah, we do snowshoeing sometimes. It depends on what the conditions are like. But yeah, cross country skiing, we do a lot of that. And my husband and my kids go downhill skiing. I keep going cross country skiing while they go downhill skiing because that's more fun for me. But yeah, we go hiking in the winter too. And we've even built a quinzee. So,
Ah, nice.
uh-huh,
You
the
better tell
whole
people what a quincy
ice
is.
structure. Yes, so a quinzee is you go out and you heap up snow and you heap it up until it's about the size of a minivan, like really tall, and you have to let it compact and sit. So normally we let it sit for at least a night. And then the next day you come in and you start digging out from underneath. And then you hollow out the inside of it. And this is a lot of work, let me tell you. By the end, we're all like just soaked in sweat and dripping and trying to get all this snow out of here. And then you've got to dry off, and then you've got to make sure that the entrance is properly ventilated so that you guys have enough air when you're sleeping in your quinzee. And that's when I was out. So I said, okay, my husband and my kids can sleep in this quinzee. I'll make sure that they're good before I leave, but there is no way I'm sleeping in the snow.
I had to pull it up, Alicia. So I was involved in scouts for many years. It's a scouting Scouts Canada, and so we do this all the time. So here's an example of some kids who are tunneling out their little quincy here, and you can see building a quincy, pile the snow. You see, there's Alicia back there. She's like piling the snow on, and then there's different ways that you can do it for structure, whatnot. But yeah, it's all hollowing it out and then pushing the snow out, and then it's actually nice and toasty in there, isn't it? So by the time
I, I I stayed in there for a little bit. Like it is much warmer in there. The interesting thing is that the soundproofing, right? Like you almost can't hear anything because that snow wax is an amazing insulator. But Mark, half of my family is from like the Caribbean, half of my family is like Northern European, and I think I got the Caribbean genes because I freeze. Like I dispel heat effectively, but I don't retain it. So
fair enough.
as long as I'm working, I'm okay and moving, but as soon as I'm laying down in the snow, I'm done. So,
That makes sense. Well, there's so many different ways that you can have fun in the Canadian winters, and hey, when you're here, you figure it out. Tonight, there's a ski swap at our here in Lethbridge, and so we're going to head over there. My daughter wants some ski stuff for Christmas, and so we thought, hey, she's still growing, and so what's the point of getting new stuff? It's gone. She has no one to pass it down. So we thought, hey, maybe we can get some good deals on some lightly used things for Christmas. So that is where we're going to head this evening. So Canada, fun. All right. Okay, let's see who we've got here tuning in, joining us. Almas says, hey, you guys are the best. Okay, well, I better give some applause for that. Now, obviously, I don't know what, Almas is comparing us to. Maybe it's because there's not too many other lawyers out there, immigration lawyers that are crazy enough to do this stuff. But thank you, Almas. Gatita, hello, good to see you. G2D2 is back. That so much sounds like Star Wars, I swear. Like, you need an R2 in there, D2. Okay, you have to let us know what that G2D2 is for. It's been bothering me for a long time. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, but G2D2 does say this is Anis from Tunisia, so that's more
Absolutely.
information. So
yes,
cool.
We do know what's Anis. Yes, and it's good to see you again as well. Okay, let's see. We've got Chris. Hey, Chris, you have not been connecting in for a long time. Now, good to see you as well. Thanks for connecting in. Let's see here. So we'll get a couple more shout outs. Please let us know where you're tuning in from. Ryad's tuning in on Facebook on the Express Entry on the Canadian Immigration Institute Facebook page. Good to see you. And Nisha says, hello, beautiful people. Awesome. Okay. And then we've got Budika, who's tuning in here on YouTube. He says, appreciate the efforts and respect that from Richmond Hill. Thanks for connecting in. And of course, we've got Mariana, who's a frequent follower. Good to see you as well. All right. So what happened yesterday? It's like clockwork now, isn't it, Alicia? Pretty much clockwork.
And we were wondering, right? Because the new TEER system is coming out November 16th. That's next week. And there are a number of changes going on with a bunch of the different government platforms. So we were wondering, is the rollout to TEER going to affect Express Entry? Were they going to do a draw yesterday? And the good news is they did a draw yesterday. So fantastic news for a lot of people, because look at the CRS. We're at 494. So, we're finally creeping below that 500 mark. And take a look at how many invitations to apply they actually issued. So they kept it at that 4,750 mark. So right around, almost 5,000 people getting invited, which is a vast improvement from what we were when we started these draws back in July.
Yeah. And these are large numbers. Now, yesterday, Cedric joined me in the live and I said, maybe it could go down to 492. Cedric said 493, so he was actually closer than I was. But what does this mean? Well, what it means is it's becoming popular again. And the people that were drawn out from before, there were a large number of people that re-entered back into the pool based on, when the draw was last time. So you can see here, 491 to 500, there's 4,366 that were in that. And you can see there was 1,200 people over 500, which is very surprising for me, because it's not until you hit this level is it a provincial nomination. So there's far more people than I anticipated. And this is probably one of the reasons why I was a little low in my estimation. 1,206 above 500 that were new that came in. Now, potentially individuals from the last draw could have, declined an invitation and went back into the pool. But if we look at the October 26th one and we look at how many people were in there, excuse me, let me just try to find the actual amount here. Well, I wonder if I can find it. Maybe I can't. I thought by clicking on it, how many people were in the pool, I thought maybe I'd be able to see. Does not look like I can. Doesn't look like it. So, but basically, I don't remember there being as many people as we have now that were actually in the pool. So you can see they always show the numbers that's most recently updated here, but it didn't seem to me that there were that many that were at that level above 500. But regardless, all of these came in. All of these are new candidates. So these are PNPs as well as all of these 500 plusers. And, what does it take to get that high? Job offers, French language ability, right?
PhD,
to really
masters.
Yep. To really push you up that high. Because even with, if you look at this 490, even 490, you need Canadian work experience. So that, because if you look all the way down to here, you guys, 469 is effectively 3 years of skilled work experience, a CLB 9, you're 29 years old, and you have a master's degree. So that's human capital alone. And so, yeah, there's still, you can see how heavily Canadian, experience is driving this ship. Yes, indeed. All right. Okay. So there we go. So let's dive in and let's ask, let's see if we'll dive into some more questions here. Um, okay. Let's see here. All right. Let's see if we can find our first one. Okay. Marielle says, hi, sir. Any update for the new pathway for applying PR? I love this. People, is there actually going to be one, Alicia? What do we
It
know?
it seems unlikely that they will do a new pathway, right? So we know that during the pandemic, they did this whole TR to PR program, and it was a giant rush, and it was a crazy time, and people were panicking to try to get their applications filed, and it was a little bit of pandemonium. So that application stream is still getting processed, right? They're still trying to work through the backlog of those applicants from that TR to PR program. And there was a private member's bill, and they were trying to say, look, we have all these international students, some of whom couldn't get in under that TR to PR program.
Yep.
We have people who are skilled workers who've been in Canada now for years, basically. And what are we going to do to help transition them to PR? And unfortunately, the minister did not say, here's a brand new program. What they did say was, we're basically tweaking all the existing programs to try to make sure that we are meeting the economic needs of the province. So provinces are increasingly going to have more say over who they nominate. There's more regional programs. So we have this rural northern immigration pilot program. We have a program for different municipalities. Depending on the province, they get to try to designate communities. So these things are taking off, and we're having more ability for people who are already in Canada to try to get PR through those types of existing streams, either through express entry with a PNP nomination, or sometimes with the rural northern immigration program. But those are fairly small numbers. So for most people, they're stuck with kind of the generally accepted existing programs. And it is theoretically possible that the minister would create a new program in the future, but so far there hasn't been any indication of what that would look like.
All right. Next question here. This is from Manpreet. Manpreet says, let's go back here. I think we've got a double question here. I'm a student in Ontario for a 1-year program. While studying, I got a knock zero job. Should I take another 1-year course or apply for work permit? So this is a classic situation of knowing the postgrad work permit is only going to be valid for 1 year. So as now students are allowed to work full-time, if student work in knock B job full-time, would that be counted for CRS under CEC? Okay, so we do have two different questions here. So let's hit the first one here, Alicia. Like, obviously, you guys, we always hit that little triangle and encourage you guys to slide over to our site here. And you can see here, when you log in, you'll see there's a link to subscribe to our newsletter. So do that, because you get notified of what's happening here with our latest blog posts. But we always encourage you guys, when you have specific questions about what you should do with your unique situations, that you click on Speak to a Lawyer, and then you book a consult with Alicia right here, 25-minute consult. And she can go through and she can give you advice and direction on what you should specifically do. But generally speaking, Alicia, we've talked a lot about this, the dangers of only doing a 1-year program
Yeah.
and what flows from that.
So it is really difficult to try to get one full year of Canadian work experience if you only have a 1-year postgrad work permit. So what happens is, if you're able to get stacking of your programs, and so be really careful about doing your stacking properly. So take a look at the program directives from immigration on how you properly stack programs. So 1-year program, if you can do another 1-year program at another designated learning institution that's also PGWP eligible, and if you can complete those two programs within 2 years, so 1 year plus a 1 year within a 2-year time period, then maybe you can apply for a 2-year, it qualifies as a 2-year program of studies, which allows you to apply for a 3-year postgrad work permit. So if you can hit that magical number of a 2-year program, it's equivalent to a proper 2-year program, then you're eligible for that 3-year work permit. If you only do 1 year, you're only eligible for a 1-year postgrad work permit. And people found out the hard way that the workforce is unpredictable, right? Sometimes you might have a layoff or you might have a break in employment if that employer is going down through a slowdown. A lot of people were stuck with this because they had COVID shutdowns and they weren't able to work. So be really careful that if you cannot have a full year of Canadian work experience, you're not going to be able to ever qualify under that work permit. You'll have to find a new employer under a new labor market impact assessment, and that's really hard for employers to get. Often it takes a long time. Some employers aren't willing to do it. So there's always a risk if you're abandoning your chance at a 2-year study term, um, if you're switching to work. The other thing is that depending on the program that you're looking at, if you're looking at the Ontario PNP programs, for example, um, switching to a NOC 0 job right as a student, I don't know how many years of prior experience you have in your home country and what kind of company you might be working for. But I know some of the PNP programs were getting really suspicious of students being offered managerial level jobs right out of school. So just, be careful to try to do some due diligence on what kind of company it is, do your skills and your prior work experience and your education match a managerial job is another thing to consider.
Yeah. And one thing I'll bring up, well, I'm going to talk about it anyways. Those of you who are watching this are well aware of the fraud that exists in my and Alicia's very own country here of Canada. And there are people that are so desperate to get these job offers, they're willing to buy into this scam of paying $30,000, $40,000 to these employers who I wish would just get shut down and ground to dust, who accept the money, and then basically you're paying your own wages. And this is what Alicia indirectly is talking about, because this is so prevalent and people are so desperate for the job offers. And there's so many crooked employers out there and agents who are, I have to be careful, because sometimes I say consultants, and not all consultants, like I don't want to disparage all consultants. And I had an interesting email exchange with a consultant who said, you just say consultants are untrustworthy and sketchy. And that is not the case. Are there consultants out there that are horrible and I wish they would not only be shut down, but kicked out of the country? Yes, I do, because they're crooked and cheat people and scam. There's some wonderful consultants out there that do a phenomenal job, that know their craft, that know immigration. But there's agents out there who are, and some of them are consultants. And boy, if I hear of an immigration lawyer who's doing this, I would love nothing more than to report them to their law society and get them disbarred. But there are representatives out there that are right dived into this scheme of taking money from people for job offers, splitting it with the employer, and then you as a worker are basically a slave to that company working for free, all for this hope of a job offer that doesn't necessarily even guarantee you PR. And so what happens then, there's this ripple effect. The PNP start to question, they start to doubt, with the corruption and fraud that exists, the good people that are doing it right, they get their applications scrutinized with a lot more detail, sometimes even wrongly refused. And so these are realities that we see as immigration lawyers all the time, because you guys come and you book consults with us. And I'm sorry if I offend immigration consultants out there that are doing it the right way. I don't mean to. But you know that you have consultants in your industry that are crooked, just awful people who are exploiting. And in a conversation I had with a consultant yesterday, she talked about a lawyer in Toronto that I'm going to look into, because if he's actually doing what she said that is happening, I'm going to do everything in my power to get that lawyer disbarred. So that's the world that we're in. And I apologize. I don't mean to offend people when I get somewhat passionate about it, but it's something that has always been a real thorn in my side, and something that I just wish I could deal with it. I wish I could do something about it.
It is really hard. And I know, for example, the BC PNP has actually changed their policy where they will not accept NOC 0 jobs for international grads through the BC PNP anymore, because there has been so much disproportionate number of people applying in that category, which is super suspect. So some of the programs are actually just not even accepting them anymore. So do be really careful that it's legitimate. And I would always say, give yourself the most opportunity to maximize your studies in Canada, which is going to give you Canadian education points, which is going to give you the option to have a 3-year postgrad as long as you do that stacking properly, and it gives you the most flexibility in terms of being able to work for as many employers as possible to gain that Canadian experience without being beholden to any one of them. So be careful about that and make sure that if you are looking at arranged employment, that it's a whole other ball of wax. It has to be an employer specific work permit.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's get to a couple more here. So Akram says, hey, Mark and Alicia, what do you think? Is there a chance to get an ITA with 480 points in the next 2 months? Okay, so I'll touch on this one, Alicia. So we can look here, you guys, and we can see that, if we're to try to get down to that 480 level, there's a lot of people we have to go down to get down to that spot. So I think if things proceeded the way it was and the government, extended 4,750, invitations in 4 draws over the next 2 months, it's not going to get down there if things stay that same way. We know that Minister Fraser has powers now that he can do targeted draws. And if that actually starts to come to fruition in the spring, which all these generic kind of fluff, yeah, we're going to look at it in the new year. Oh, I've been through this, so I'm tired of even mentioning it. If something actually does happen in the spring, he could just choose a particular cohort of people. He could just say anyone that has these knock codes, you're going to, we're only extending invitations to people with this particular knock code. He could do that. And if that's the case, then the CRS scores become less important. And he could say anyone who has had a post-grad work permit within these periods of times, we're going to extend just an invitation to you. And so there's a lot of different ways in which he can use these powers to determine who is going to get an invitation to apply. All right. Casey, good to see you down in California. I think the weather's probably a little bit nicer down there than it is here. Okay, Alicia, this one's in your wheelhouse. Marianne Go says, what is your experience in Alberta Express score? So this is the Alberta Express entry stream. I have an applicant who has a score of 325 points in Alberta with job offer, no invites. What's happening?
Yeah, so we could flip over, Mark, to the Alberta PNP and just take a look at their inventory, because this is interesting to look at. And I've had a few consults recently with people who are looking at the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, which is now what it's called. It used to be the AINP and now it's the AAIP. But take a look at the inventory here. And so you can take a look at the streams for workers. And actually, if you go back up to the top, Mark,
Yep.
look at the number of total nominations. So every year, and this year, Alberta has had 6,500 nominations. And so these were updated just this week, and we're already sitting at 5,837 nomination certificates being issued so far in 2022. And the reason that's important is sometimes the Alberta Provincial Nominee Program just shuts down. It won't take any new applications. They don't warn us about it. There's nothing saying that this is coming, but you can kind of take a look at the numbers and see if that's a possibility. So we might be at that stage where it could be a possibility. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, it'll give us a breakdown of how many applicants are in the pool. So we know that there are key streams. So Alberta Express Entry is what the question was about. There's already about 240 applicants in that Alberta Express Entry PNP stream. There are 935 under Alberta Opportunity Stream. So if you do the math on that, if they were to select everybody or the majority of those people, they're already at the limit for the nomination certificates for this year. And they also haven't done a draw under Alberta PNP since July. Right? So there has been nothing new coming down in terms of draws from Alberta PNP. So we'll see how many more they do. They're probably waiting to see who they get. They can definitely do targeted draws. The other thing that Alberta tells you about is what the knock is for the most popular knocks that are sitting there. So there we go, application volumes by occupation. So if you're, unfortunately, these are not ineligible, but if you're under one of these knock codes, they have so many applicants under these categories that they may be less likely to give invitations or nominations to these people. So this is where you can get a little bit more insight into what's happening with the Alberta draws. Take a look at the inventory, take a look at the last time that they've done a draw, which was back in the summer. And there are some occupations that they don't prefer, even if it does have a job offer.
Yes. So last Friday, you guys, I spoke with the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, the head officials, regarding the rural renewal stream. And this is a new stream that they are created to help facilitate, individuals settling in rural communities in Alberta. And you can see it says no availability due to low application volumes. Well, this is now starting to ramp up a little bit, and they absolutely want this to be successful. So this area here, if you're looking at any program to go through, and you're under the gun and you want things to happen quickly in terms of your nomination, this is the pathway. It really is, because they said they were processing in anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks these applications, and yes, there's a small number that have initially gone through, but this is the priority. And if, as Alicia identified up here at the top, if they have 6,500 nominations, and I'm actually just going to pull in just a comment here, and I'm always curious where individuals get their data, their information, but LJH says all provinces invite only about 2,000 people per month, meaning 25,000 per year. Why they need and how can they consume the 100K quota? So please understand, like if you do your math, each of the provinces have, generally speaking, around this number here. And so you look at the provinces and the territories, there's always a few extra spots at the end of the year that are allocated to the provinces in addition to their minimum quota if they have a need. And all provinces, some provinces may have more space allocated to them. I'm not sure if there's a distinction or if they're all at 6,500. I can't remember. But if you look here and you look at carefully, you read things carefully, you can see that for the AEI piece, the Alberta Opportunity Stream here, they have approximately 935. And if you scroll down to the bottom here, I'm just looking, when did it say it was last updated? It was just
November 8th.
November the 8th. Oh yes, here, November. Okay, accurate as of November the 8th. So this is the 5,837 nominations as of November the 8th. If you look down here, this right here says applications received after this date have not yet been assigned to an officer for assessment. So they're kind of slowing down a little bit. And why? Because they are placing emphasis here on these and other programs. So it's a little bit of a dance, and, including, there's priority given to accelerated tech pathway and things like this. You can see priority processed. So that's why sometimes the numbers are, they slow down, and it's always a little bit of a black box when it comes to where they're at with this, with the processing, and every province is the same. So there you go. Okay, let's get to another question here. So the next one is from Almudena, and this is a good one. And it's not a question; it's more of a comment. And I want everybody to feel like they can post whatever they want, because this is your lives, and everybody has different experiences accessing the Canadian Immigration Program. But Almudena says, after almost 3 years working in Canada, what they told me was go home. Now, we don't know what she means by that. I'm assuming that the pathways, there's probably some things in how Almudena managed her immigration strategy. She probably was caught in the pandemic, all these kinds of things. Says, with 2 health degrees, Canada treats the immigrants incredibly bad. And obviously Almudena here had a really, really bad experience. And I'll be honest, this is one of the reasons why Alicia and I really, really, we hate having consults with people, but we love having consults with people. We hate it because people like Almudena will contact us now and say, what can you do now to help me fix this? And there was a time when Alicia and I could fix pretty much everything, because, 15, almost 20 years ago, there were always officers that you could talk to. They had way more discretion than they have now. And there was always a pathway to kind of sort through things. But now, because there's so much more increased volume within the immigration program, this desire to be efficient cuts off all avenues for us to actually talk to a live human being who has the capacity to help someone on an individual basis. So those of you who love the fast processing and want it, it came at a cost. And the cost is the humanity and the individual circumstances of real people like Almudena, who feels like it was a complete waste. And we don't know for Almudena if she was one of those ones that was, I'm not going to say duped, although I want to say duped, but was convinced that it was a good idea to go to school for a year, or come and work in an occupation that didn't have pathways for permanent residence, or who knows what the issues are. But these immigration consultations that we do, like Alicia and I would absolutely love for people to book them with us right at the beginning of their journey. So we can give them strategies, we can give them direction and advice, because after the individuals have already burned up their postgrads or they've made certain decisions, we can't unravel things. So that's my spiel. Alicia, what are your thoughts on this one?
And it is such a shame, right? I never want people to be in a situation where they've spent so much time and effort and money to try to come to Canada and build their future here, and it all falls apart because they just didn't know. And immigration is so complex that, especially during the pandemic, there have been so many temporary public policies and changes to what normally the law says that if you're not on top of this and reviewing what's happening literally every week, you can really get caught. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing that I will say actually is I have had 2 consults this week where I was just really proud of people for taking the initiative and figuring things out early rather than late. So I had a consult actually this morning with somebody who was in the Middle East who said, look, I'm coming to Canada in January. I have a job offer. Does it qualify? What are the pathways that I might be eligible to apply under for the provincial nominee programs? How do I need to set myself up to make sure that I have the best chance at express entry? And if I speak to somebody like that right from the beginning, it is so much better. I had another person who actually, and this was kind of a good news and a bad news story. I had another consult with somebody who's in Canada who finished their postgrad work permit, and they didn't realize they took a job that was actually a NOC, right? It was actually a low skilled job, and they thought they were in a high skilled job. It took them a year and a half to realize it. And then all of a sudden, the good news was they had 3 years on their postgrad work permit. They were still able to switch over to try to apply. So they did get a new job. They've been working towards high skilled work experience, and they may have a shot now at making sure that they can get that high skilled Canadian work experience. And so they were asking me, are these job duties in line with a high skilled work? And those are great because if there's the opportunity to save it and to say, yes, here's your pathway to be able to apply for express entry, we love those stories because people are being proactive and they've actually realized where they could have gone wrong.
All right, let's slip over to a practical question. And we get this a lot with our emphasis on express entry within the firm. I think, Alicia, we probably do more express entry related work for our clients than almost any other area. Obviously, we do a lot of study permits and spousal sponsorships, and Cedric is really taking off with his judicial review and mandamus, and we all do restoration stuff. But this is a very, very common question. So Sri Krishna says, does only reference letter enough to upload for foreign work experience, or is it necessary to include a pay slip?
Mm-hmm. And Sri Krishna, I'd really encourage you to take a look at hiring us if you can, or Mark's do-it-yourself course if you can't hire us, because it does give you fantastic practical tips on how do you actually prove your foreign work experience. And basically, immigration says it is up to you. It's up to you to prove it. The onus is on you as the applicant to be able to show that the work experience you're claiming is legitimate. And yes, you have to make sure that your job offer letter has these basic requirements in terms of providing the evidence so the officers understand what kind of work you do have through that record of employment, and also that the hours were there, that the dates or the length of time that you're claiming can be backed up. And so those pay slips, tax forms, other sort of proof of how you've been working is usually very, very important to also include to back it up, because you might get an officer who just says there's not enough evidence and it's easy to refuse you.
And one of the biggest mistakes that individuals make is they take the path of least resistance. And so they'll say, okay, well, I only need to do this, so I'm not going to do any more. And in fairness, when it comes to express entry, their requirements are very, very rigid. And that's part of the reason why I created the course, was because the smallest little thing, that's the thing that gets your application returned as incomplete. And then the ITA that you received, you're back in the pool, and good luck if you're going to get another one. We've also had some horrible situations where I had a client who received the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. She received the notification of interest through the express entry stream. got her nomination, and then submitted the wrong ECA. She had an older one, and you know how long she's been at it. So she uploaded the wrong one, got her application returned as being incomplete. And then by that time, her nomination had expired, and there was, like, Alberta doesn't allow individuals to revive them. It's just not, it's just not possible. And so it just, it breaks my heart when I think about people who, there's lots of information online that says you don't need to hire anyone. You can do it yourself. It's all good. But it's the little things that cause the disastrous effects in people's applications. All right. Okay, here's an interesting one. So Curious says, CIC News, okay, they're obviously the godfathers of immigration news in the country, so has released the latest IRCC inventory. Wondering why invitations still being issued when so many applications are still outstanding. Interested to hear your views on this. So why are they still issuing 4,750 invitations when there's this backlog that's still there?
Yeah. And it's because they're playing the game of trying to figure out when people are going to land and making sure that it falls within their targets for the year. So they have allocated, and Mark and I have talked about the immigration levels plan a little bit as well, but they've allocated a certain number of immigrants in different categories. So they have spousal sponsorships and family reunification. They have the economic stream, and the economic stream is going to comprise about 60% of who Canada is inviting to become a permanent resident. And so they keep doing the invitations under express entry because that's one of the key economic streams. That is how we bring people in. And so if you slow that down too much, you're not going to meet your overall target for your composition of how many economic applicants you need in a year.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors at play. All right, I want to highlight this one. This is kind of in response to the past, one of the previous comments that was made. But Helios here, this is unbelievable. So it took me 7 years of grinding to reach CRS 495 at the age of 36 years. So when Helios first started, 7 years ago, 29 years of age, maximum points for age. Every year, 5 was gone, 5 was lost, 5 was lost of age points, CRS points. And I got my ITA yesterday. It just takes time. And so I want to give a massive round of applause to Helios here. And when I have people like Helios that have sacrificed so much, to realize their dream of immigrating to Canada, this is really why I created the course, because the last thing in the world I would want is for Helios or anyone who's sacrificed so much just to get that precious ITA to make one little mistake that could totally been avoided when they're submitting their application and get it rejected, get it sent back. And so I know the sacrifices that you guys make. And, and that's why within the firm, we do a ton, we help a ton of clients with our express entry, with their express entry processes. We offer the course as an option. We offer retaining us for our full support when people are preparing their applications and getting them right the first time. And so those are some of the things that we do to help people. But Helios, more power to you. That is awesome. All right. Let's hit here. Let's go with Fatima here. Fatima Amor. That's like a Portuguese kind of name there. Okay. Hi, for permanent residency applications, do I need to submit Saudi police clearance certificates, or I'll just submit an explanation letter that I can't not provide it since I'm not a Saudi resident? So I can pull this up too while you're doing this.
Yeah, so there are some countries, and what you want to do, and Mark's pulling it up, I know he is. We've got the mind link. I can tell what he's doing in the background there. He's pulling up express entry and police certificates, and how do you apply for your police certificate? And it's going to give you these drop-down menus, and you're going to put in the country, every country where you have, resided for more than 6 months in a row within the last period of time since you've turned 18. So for Saudi Arabia, it is very specific that you're not able to actually provide that unless you've obtained that police certificate while you were still in KSA most of the time. I have had some clients who are able to get an authentication and get it, but most of the time you actually will provide a printout of this screen. That's what I would recommend when you're doing your express entry, is show the officer that this is what IRCC is saying for express entry police certificates for Saudi Arabia. You say, look it, I can't provide it because I'm not in the country right now. And you literally highlight this and you attach it in your slot, your upload slot for your police certificate for Saudi Arabia. And hopefully they're then going to realize what the process is, and then they will go and do that request on their end.
Yeah, exactly. And I like, Alicia, I like your strategy there. Sometimes we go out of our way to provide the officers with their own program delivery instructions so that there is no miscommunication. And let's face it, Minister Fraser, I wonder if I've got him here. Let's see. Oh yeah, here he is. He's joining me here. Hey, Minister, how you doing? So Minister Fraser here, he kind of pops in and pops out periodically. But one of the things that, one of the things that he's talked about repeatedly in their efforts to try to deal with these backlogs is the hiring of new officers. And not all officers, okay, let's put this into context, you guys. Okay. In 2002, I worked as a summer student for the Canada Border Service Agency. Then it was Citizenship and Immigration Canada. And I worked as a border officer. And after a couple of weeks of training, they turned me loose. And there were periods of time where I was working by myself together with the border officers, because there was a split between immigration and border at the time. There wasn't the Canada Border Service Agency. But I was making decisions on people's entry to Canada from an immigration perspective. I had the authority to do that even as a summer student, even on my own. And so just like these new officers that are hired, they don't know everything. And so we go out of our way to try to eliminate any possibility of misunderstanding or getting an application refused improperly. We know the consequences to people when that happens. So yes, so we will definitely include an actual copy of these instructions. If it says truly that you do not need to provide that when you first apply, we include it in there. And then you can see at the bottom, like Alicia was identifying here, it says if you do not currently have legal status in Saudi Arabia, you're not required. If you're asked for a police certificate, right, I cannot provide a police certificate because blah, 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 blah. Just like that. All right. Okay, let's dive into a few more questions here. All right, here's another one we get a lot of, Alicia. This is a lot. The Air Force says, for the Schedule A form, I made a typo mistake in the personal history. I mentioned I was in my country from April 2019 to September 2019 as a citizen, but my address history says I was in Canada. So Alicia, what do you do with that kind of a situation? We get lots of consults with this.
We do. And this is something to be aware of when you're writing your express entry profile on the dates, right? Because depending on how they've listed it, sometimes it's month and sometimes it's month and day. And sometimes the order matters. Sometimes it's day and month or month and day. So be really careful about looking at your dates and then cross-referencing everything, right? It should basically, if you look through your personal history, and I know in the express entry profiles, they don't have the personal history, but you can proactively go through and do a timeline of every single thing you have done and where you did it. And sometimes you might have overlapping periods of time, and that's where things can get interesting because sometimes it's a judgment call in terms of, if you were studying but working at the same time and you went on a student exchange, what do you put, right? Which country do you put you were traveling in? Which country do you put you were living in? And where were you studying? So these are things we talk to clients about often when we do our consultations or when they've hired us to go through their application in detail. And basically, I put on my immigration officer hat and say, all right, if I were reviewing this, what would be confusing, or where would I say somebody's not being honest or there could be an error? And that's where we try to get you to definitely explain that in a letter of explanation, so that if you do have interesting quirks, then you make sure that you explain them. If you have a typo and you've already submitted your application, then you will want to do a web form to notify immigration as soon as you've realized that there is an error or a mistake in your application, and explain to them what happened and why and what the proper, accurate state of affairs is.
All right, let's jump to the next question. Okay, so Mariana, this is a good question, Mariana. She says, since the new people will become eligible for EE after November 16th, is it possible scores will go up again? My score is 494, but didn't get drawn yesterday. Hoping no pauses, same or lower score next draw. What do you think for Mariana? Do you
Hmm.
think that, she didn't get drawn on this one? So close. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts? Because they cut it off at 47.50.
Right. And there's also the tie-breaking rule, right? So if you
Mhm.
take a look, it was June. The tiebreaker rule was for June. So whoever had their express entry profile in, and I forget exactly, I think it might have been June 6th or something. Yeah, June 6th. So there you go. Whoever had their profile in at 494 as of June 6th is going to get that invitation, but everybody who had it more recently may not, right? It might go back into the pool. So what Marianne is talking about is also November 16th is when they're implementing TEER. That's when the new NOC 2021 takes effect. And this could have an interesting impact on some of the NOC codes because we'll have some people who are now eligible, mainly under like the Atlantic Immigration Program, but we'll also have some people who drop off. Not a ton of NOCs are going to be able to drop off. So it may switch how people are being chosen or who is going to be eligible for their express entry. And this is why I would really recommend that everybody take a look. They do a NOC comparison between the NOC 2016 and the NOC 2021, and they carefully examine every single period of work experience they have claimed in their express entry profile to make sure that those job duties have not changed. Because if they have changed and you're no longer meeting 75% of those job duties, you might not be able to claim that past work anymore, or it might work in your favor. And maybe those job duties have changed in a way that you could actually claim a period of work where you didn't think you could before. And you'll want to be really careful in those situations because you'll be changing your profile and you'll have to explain why there was work experience you didn't have on there that all of a sudden has materialized and you're now trying to claim. So be really careful about how you look at your work experience.
Mhm. Okay, let's go to our next question. Let's see here. Okay, so Chris, back to Chris. So Chris says, by the way, received our post-grad work permit extension approvals. Awesome. That's fantastic, Chris. Should we withdraw our visitor record application or leave it there? Is it still refundable? So this is although Chris, obviously, we love hearing from past people that we've worked with. This is almost kind of one of these, but generally speaking, Alicia, when people have two applications in the queue and they get the one approved and one still pending, what do you advise them to do in those circumstances? Just let it run, or do you advise to request that the application be withdrawn?
Yeah, and Chris, this is a tough question because I don't know what your TRV status is and your family members, whether you're visa exempt or visa required. If you are visa required in some circumstances, even if you get that PGWP extension for working, you might need to have extended your visitor status also. So eh, it's not necessarily that you'll want to withdraw it. It just really depends on what your status is and how long it's valid for each of your family members. But if you do have two applications, one of which is approved that completely negates the necessity for the other one, then you could ask for a refund if that has not yet been processed. But if it's a TRV status question and you do need to extend that TRV, or if you're going to be traveling and you need to have that visa in your passport, that's a different thing and you may still need it.
All right, got another question from Manpreet here. As of now, students are allowed to work full time. If a student work in NOC B job full time, would that be counted for CRS under CEC? Very important thing for you guys to understand.
Yeah, and so Chanel has actually written a blog on the new ability to work. Be careful with the dates that you are allowed to work. And so it is important to make sure that you are carefully watching which date students are allowed to work without having a cap on their work experience, or sorry, without a cap on their hours. The other thing that I would say is this has not, unfortunately, it has not changed. Oh, there it is, breaking news. Um, it has not changed the ability to claim express entry Canadian work experience for that period. So if you are still on a full-time study permit, then you are not able to count the time that you're working towards Canadian work experience points. And that is really, really important that people understand. You never want to be in a position that you're going to be sacrificing the legitimacy of your study permit or your ability to maintain your study permit conditions by working too much, because you can't claim it for CRS points for Canadian work experience anyways.
Okay. Ash says, hello, Mark. Hope you're well. I'm doing just fine. Thank you. I'm getting a gift deed from my mom for proof of funds. Do I still need to attach a bank statement for 6 months?
And so, Ash, again, I mean, this is something we'd want to talk to you about to make sure that you're meeting all the requirements for proof of funds. Generally, everybody has to prove proof of funds unless they are invited to apply under Canadian Experience Class, so they get their ITA under CEC, or if they get their arranged employment points. And this is not just, oh, I have a job offer. It's actually a job offer that qualifies as a qualifying arranged employment offer. And I wrote a whole article about this because I cannot tell you how many times I see people doing this incorrectly, and I'm actually working on a little explainer video on it as well, so that'll be out soon. But be really careful. If you do have to prove those funds under federal skilled worker, then you need to make sure that you have had those funds probably for at least 6 months from the date that you are doing your application. And so, yes, you can have your gift deed to show that you meet that amount, but immigration is suspicious. They want to know, where did that money come from? How long has it been there? And can you prove the source of those funds? And normally they won't accept a gift deed from somebody other than a direct family member, because they just don't believe that somebody else is going to give you that much money.
Yeah.
So it's good it's coming from your mom, but you probably do need to include various bank statements as well.
Okay. Rochelle says, I'm an open work permit holder, arrived last July. Question. Can I apply for the permanent residence for our family, even though the student is still studying? If yes, when can I apply for PR for our family? So once again, I'll hit that bell. And Rochelle, there are a lot of pieces that we need to look at when we're trying to determine how best to answer your question. Generally speaking, there's nothing preventing someone who's an accompanying spouse, if they meet the requirements of whatever program, permanent resident program, to become the principal applicant and proceed, while the other spouse is an international student. But there's a lot of moving parts to this, and we strongly encourage you to slide over and click on Speak to a Lawyer here and book a consult. The links, you guys, for all these things that we're talking about are always in the description, whether it's the Express Entry course and how to access it. You can just click on the link below. Yeah, you can get access to all those things, including the link to our website and booking a consult. But Alicia, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts to add for Rochelle here.
Yeah. So, and this is a situation where people are able to come as a student, they're able to bring their spouse, and their spouse gets an open spousal work permit, which is great, because right now the open work permits for spouses, the processing times for some countries are ridiculous. I was working with a family, and they've been separated already throughout. In this case, the husband came to Canada to study. Mom and baby are back home in Pakistan, and they really wanted to get reunited, and they did that open spousal work permit, and it's been a year. And now immigration is saying the processing times are 62 weeks, Mark, for a work permit being processed through Pakistan. So it's great that you're here. The difficulty is, you've got to take a look at the CRS points if you were the principal applicant versus if your spouse was the principal applicant. And it really does depend on whether you meet those minimum eligibility requirements for Canadian work and foreign work, plus your language, plus your education credential assessments, and then whether your spouse does. And strategically, maybe you have both people have a profile, but in some circumstances where you have the student still studying who has to apply for a postgrad work permit, you still technically need to show that you have temporary intent to be in Canada. And so once you have those express entry applications in process, you'll have to work a little bit harder to show that temporary intent. So those are some things to consider.
Yes. All right. And this is another one I'll just pull up here. And this is also one that I'd recommend booking a consult. So how long is it taking for a spousal approval? I'm also in the express entry with 464. Should I wait or apply through the spousal? And lots of people, this is what we help you guys with, is trying to determine in reality which options are the best. And sometimes we take a dual kind of a dual approach. It's interesting, Alicia. I've seen as I've worked more closely with clients now, that with the linking of TR to PR pathways and other programs and online filing, we're now starting to see IRCC try to restrict ability of individuals to apply through multiple permanent resident programs. Well, by law, they can't do that. So by law, they can't prevent someone from having multiple permanent resident applications in the queue. They can prevent people from having multiple sponsorships, but not applying through multiple programs. So we do a lot of consults to try to sort that out. And when it comes to, should I wait or should I apply? How long is it taking? Well, what was the last spousal sponsorship approval that we had, Alicia? I know Chanel had one just the other day. I can't remember how long it was, but it was pretty fast.
6 months.
6 months, yeah. I think. Yeah. And that's notwithstanding the lengthy processing times that are now being posted by IRCC, but I won't fault them. I'd much rather have them under promise and over deliver than the other way. So
yeah, I had one processed in 6 months as well, but it really does depend on, how complicated of a spousal sponsorship application. Are there factors that make it more difficult for an officer to review in terms of, is it a bona fide relationship? Is it genuine? Is there any allegation that you could be trying to immigrate for immigration purposes or being married for immigration purposes? So those are all things that we would definitely want to talk about in depth to make sure that that spousal has every good chance of success.
yes. All right, we'll wrap things up here with two last comments. So this is the kind of the culmination from Almundina. They said, I had 533 points, but due to the lack of rounds, my work permit expired only 15 days before the date that would have invited me. So yes, I'm really sad. I came back home and I'm not willing to go back. And we completely understand that. Now, I'm always curious with people if they truly understood what options were available to them and which ones weren't. Now, maybe it's possible, Amandina, that your Canadian work experience that you acquired is now older than 3 years. Maybe you've been home for a long time. Because remember, for the Canadian experience class, you don't have to be actually living in Canada to continue to be eligible for an ITA. And, with 533 points at the time, if they just weren't doing rounds of invitations and they were only doing the PNPs, and that's what you're referring to, and now you've lost out on that opportunity. Well, I completely understand that. I wish, Almundina, that you would have booked a consult with us and that we could have helped, at least to confirm that you truly exhausted all avenues. But I don't know, Alicia, if you have any last minute comments for Almundina here.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some interesting public policies, if it was during the pandemic, for people to ask for interim work authorization if they were able to find another employer who was willing to go through an LMIA process with them. Even if you didn't get that new work permit yet, if you properly submitted it and you ask for that interim work authorization, then that can be enough to give you those extra 15 days to bump you over to put you into that 1 year of Canadian work experience. So, it's really tricky to say, but sometimes there are ways to ask to see if there's another possibility.
Yes. All right, we'll finish off with one fun one. So no one asks me where I'm from, Alicia. Like, if I go back, I would consider myself Norwegian. I think that's probably, but if we got a little bit of German, a little bit of English, my kids on my wife's side, they've got actually some Métis. So they have back to the Red River settlement in Manitoba. So they have, so they're all Métis in my wife. But this person is saying, hi, by any chance, is Alicia from India since the surname is Bahari? I'm an Indian, no hate. So we know there's no hate there, King. But so we'll end off on a probing private question, which Alicia's already talked about on the live. But do you want to enlighten everybody about your ancestry and your where you're from? And
It's actually interesting because so my dad is from the Caribbean. He's from what used to be British Guyana, and my great grandparents somehow came over from India, and they have some of the records, but not all of them. And so what happened was, the story is anyways, we know that one of those great grandparents had actually come from the Bihar region in India, and that is why they took the name Bihari, but they changed their name. So we don't actually know what their name was before they left. We only know what it was after when they came to the Caribbean. And then anyways, my family on my dad's side is from British Guyana, and then my family on my mom's side is actually American and Swedish and mixed European. So I have a giant mix of a whole bunch of different backgrounds.
Nice. Awesome. There you go, King. Now you know. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in today. We're going to wrap this one up. I've got to meet with a client in about 9 minutes, and I know Alicia's got things waiting for her. Once again, it was great. Really, really awesome. Great questions. And your questions really drive our ability to make this live Q&A what it is. Now, remember, if you, for whatever reason, didn't get your question answered, there could be reasons for that. And some people I see tend to post their question over and over, hoping that I'll answer it, or say, well, why didn't you ask, why didn't you bring up my question? Well, the questions, we really try to keep them general in nature that benefit or would benefit the most number of people that watch. And we always get between, 1,500 and 2,000 people that watch these lives after. And so it's important that we focus on questions that provide information that will help as many people as possible. What we don't like to do, and what we really legally can't do, is provide legal advice. So I want to reiterate that what we're indicating here is not legal advice. This is information designed to help people understand the programs and the policies of IRCC and what they can expect based on, the program eligibility requirements. But if for whatever reason you are in a situation where you need your question answered, it's specific, remember that we are here for you guys. So that's why we do, as a law firm, as a Canadian immigration law firm, we have consultations that you can come and you can book, and it's really easy. So all you have to do is click on 25-minute consult or the 50-minute consult, and you can book right away. Now, Alicia is a busy person. She's full tomorrow, but you can see you usually don't have to wait very long to be able to get a consult with one of the lawyers. And so it's as simple as choosing the date, choosing the time that works for you, and bang, you're good to go. I also want to highlight that on our YouTube channel, we have a ton of things going on. We've been releasing not only our live Q&As that you see every Wednesday and Thursday and Tuesday, and Cedric has got his, but we're also releasing short little videos that are very strategic on areas that are current and very topical. So you can see Cedric released one on web forms. Chanel, really working 20 plus hours a week. Can students really work? And that was one of the questions we had today. We encourage you to watch that video. How to immigrate to Canada 4 ways in 4 minutes. That was another one that Cedric had produced. And refused Canada visas. This is one you definitely want to watch if you've had any issues with that. And then finally, you can see here this TEER to PR. If you want a real big picture look at what the world's going to be, potentially where the minister is going to be focusing next year, you definitely want to go check out that video right here that I did on the TEER to PR pathways that the minister is looking at, and how he's going to be utilizing these new powers that he has, and ultimately some of the industries and a lot of takeaways even for international students on where you need to focus your time. Finally, if you go to the Canadian Immigration Institute website right here, or you click in the links below, you'll see we've got lots of new DIY courses that are coming. And we've got some big changes that Igor and I are going to be sharing in just a little bit. But these courses that we have coming up include the Spousal Sponsorship course, which is the next one on November 21st to the 24th. And the November 21st to the 24th is when the masterclass is. You can subscribe now, and I'd strongly encourage you to do that and start watching the video so that when the time comes for the masterclass, you got a whole bunch of good questions that you can ask. Then we have December 12th to the 16th. We've got our study permit course. This is the first inaugural one. And because it's brand new, we're pre-selling this one at a discounted rate for those who wish to get access to it. Now, the materials will be released on December the 1st, and then the masterclass itself will be from December 12th to the 16th. So I've told my wife, we're going to take some time away from our Christmas plans to make sure that I can do this. But those who are looking to study next year, this is a great way to start. And finally, as always, we have our regular express entry course. And that's where we have all the tools and checklists and sample documents. And there's from November 28th to the December the 1st, we have those master classes associated with it. So all those courses are available for you. And remember, as always, within our firm, we not only do right here speaking to a lawyer consults, but if you want to learn more about our approach, our team, all you have to do is click on this link and you can learn more about the way we work with our clients. And truly, we feel that there's no better way for us and for our clients to produce an application that is complete and correct. And that helps us as lawyers sleep at night. And so you can watch a little video on this, and there's no middle people, you guys. It's Alicia and you. It's me and you. It's Cedric and you, and Chanel and you, and no one in between that's going through every single part of your application, all the way to helping you actually submit it. So just wanted to highlight all those things. Any last comments there, Alicia?
Yeah, I would just say that sometimes people don't realize, they say, how do we hire you? And you actually hire us by starting with that consultation. And the reason is we really need to understand the whole situation and whether the thing you want to hire us for is the thing that we can actually help you with that you need. And so if you start with that consultation, we're able to figure out, okay, yes, this is the application. This is where we're going to spend our time and energy, and that's what we're going to go forward with a legal services agreement. So if you want to hire us, still start with that consultation, because we need to make sure that we understand your situation in full.
Yep, exactly. All right, everybody else that we didn't get a chance to say hello to, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And thank you, Marianne, for your great question. We'll see you all next week. Take care.